first.
Have you found that your skills aren't matching up with the challenges ahead? Here are 19 essential skills for success that school never taught you. Get your free copy by following the link below or visit getautonomy.info/19skills.
Good to see everybody again gathering. It's been a few weeks since season 7 ended, and now we're welcoming in season 8 students. This is a special autonomy guest session for season 8. So tonight's topic is all about private membership associations, getting your organization from the public sector to the private sector. So our guest tonight is Aaron Bowman. He's a certified PMA Power advisor, and he has a lot of experience working with PMAs. He was discovered by fellow autonomizer Justin Olson, and Justin interviewed him, and that's Aaron has been creating videos and content on that topic ever since, trying to teach people and get them started and educate them on the concept of private membership associations. His YouTube channel is called Rebel Alliance, which is easy to remember, but it needs mentioning since you would never guess that if you were specifically looking for PMAs. So, Aaron, to get us started tonight, we'll just cover those topics. What are PMAs? And we'll go from there.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for having me tonight. I appreciate it. And I got to start off by apologizing. Last time I was supposed to be here, I got the date wrong because I've got 10 different pans in the fire. So I do apologize. Glad everybody's here tonight, and excited to sit here and talk to you all and answer hopefully a lot of questions when we get to the Q&A. So private membership associations have been around for a very long time. They are very popular in the southern states where they're still dry counties. And basically what it does is it allows you to have a association that is private, that is non-statutory compliant, that allows you to operate in the, we'll call it the private sector. So if you were in a dry county, for example, maybe in Texas or somewhere down that way, and two of us walked into a restaurant and you see me drinking a beer while I'm eating my burger, and you're like, hey, I want to buy a beer with my burger, they'll say no, because you have to be a part of that association to be able to buy alcohol in that dry county. So I got turned on to these during the whole pandemic, and at the beginning of that, we set up a PMA here in Connecticut, and then I really wanted to know more on how to set these up for other people. So that's kind of how I got started in all this, and it's a lot of reading, a lot of dry court cases, a lot of understanding the Constitution, and really having a good grasp on, the 1st, 5th, 9th, 10th, and 14th Amendment, to where you understand where associations come from. And there is a ton of court cases out there that show you that these are a real thing. It's not something Aaron made up in his, bed one night at 2 a.m. These have been around for a very long time. And some associations you wouldn't even know are associations, not necessarily private associations, but they are associations. And this is where we get a lot of our case law from. So you have the Bar Association, you have the Boy Scouts of America, you have the NAACP, and that's kind of some of the associations that are right in plain sight that you don't know about. So that's kind of how I got started with all this and with PMAs, and the importance of having a PMA, especially now in this climate that we're in with being ruled by emergency orders and everything else, is the fact that during this pandemic, some people weren't allowed to meet more than 4 in a group, or no more than 4 family members in a house. Now there's 7 of us in our family, and we wanted to go out to a restaurant, we would have had to sit at 2 different tables. It was just ridiculous, right? So we decided to do, myself and the other trustees that I have at the time weren't trustees, we decided to throw together a Freedom Bazaar. We just wanted people to get together, not worrying about masks, not worrying about giving fist bumps or the elbow thing and shaking hands and giving hugs. And so we did that. And then we decided to say, okay, well, how do we do this and how are we protected doing this? Because there's obviously a need for it. And that's where Liberty House Ministries was born and really started to build a thriving community here in Connecticut. So that's kind of, overall what PMAs are. And really when it comes down to understanding PMAs, you really need to understand some of the court cases out there. And what a lot of them say is that you have a sanctuary, or you have a constitutional shelter, and that's in Pierce versus Society of Sisters. And you guys are going to see me looking over to the right here, or the left on the screen, just because I have some notes and stuff over here, because I can't keep all this stuff straight sometimes. But that's kind of the basis of the association, is to be able to gather, not have to ask for permission. You know, I guess the easiest way to explain it is having a PMA that you're operating, whether you have a farm, an intentional community, whether you have a, you know, you want to sell, you know, unpasteurized goat milk and cheese and butter or what have you, having that association, if you could sell it to your family members, or you can sit around your dining room or dinner table with your friends and family discussing whatever, maybe you're a naturopath, or, you know, maybe you're, you know, provide acupuncture or natural type of healing. You can sit and say certain things to your friends and family that you couldn't say to the general public. And that's how PMAs work. And it allows a variety of people to operate without the tyrannical overreach of your local and federal government, basically. I don't know, Chris, do you want me to keep going on that? Do you have a different
No, that's
topic?
great. No, Aaron, if you could, yeah, you've covered. That's a brilliant intro. Could you elaborate a bit more on your experience and your trajectory, and what made you the certified PMA consultant?
Yeah. So for me to be a certified consultant, I guess it was kind of the right place, right time. So I originally was introduced to this by David Edwards, and said, okay, well, if you're going to set up our ministry here in Connecticut, I want to know how to do it, because it's not very well known here in New England. And I want to be able to help other people within the community, because I think this is a brilliant thing, and it's just not taught, right? We're not taught civics. We're not taught laws. We don't understand how the court system works or any of that stuff. They always want us to hire somebody else. So I dove in, you know, both feet. It was, you know, probably halfway through the pandemic, I think, somewhere around there. So we had Liberty House set up, and then it was, okay, what court cases can I read? What can I get into? What can I see where PMAs have failed? Because PMAs have failed in certain instances. And so then that was just working with David and a few of the other quote unquote senior advisors, I guess is what we call ourselves, because there are newer advisors that he has taken on, because he was inundated once, you know, everything started happening in lockdowns, and you couldn't go to the grocery store, and you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that. And a lot of people were freaking out, and it was like, okay, well, how can I still operate? Because we know this isn't right. And we know we have our unalienable rights, and we know we have, you know, this constitution in place, whether it's your state constitution or the federal constitution, or the US Constitution rather. And it just turned into, okay, well, I really need to understand this. So it was doing, you know, we were doing weekly meetings. We were going through the documents and how to create them. And then once I felt I had a good enough understanding of it, I started writing these for other people. And then at that point, David came out with a course. Him and one of the other advisors, Guy, were working on it. And now if you wanted to become an advisor, you have to have your own PMA, and then you have to go through, there's course 1 and 2, I think, right now, and then you get a certificate. And it really just gives you an understanding of how PMAs operate, how to set them up, what court cases you need to look at, how to deal with local enforcement, whether it's you know, here in Connecticut, it's Department of Children and Family Services, whether you have what they would consider an unlicensed child care facility or education facility. Those are called PEAs. So there's a couple different types of PMAs. I'll use PMA just in general, but the types, I guess we should cover that before we get too far into this, is you have your standard PMAs. So you have your private membership association, your private health or PHA association, then you have your PEA or your private education association. Now, those are just your standard ones. Now, those standard ones could also have a faith to them, whether it's a faith in nature, faith in God, faith in, I don't know, the willow tree in your backyard, if you can articulate that enough to have it make sense. Then you have your faith-based PMAs, PHAs, PEAs. And then on top of that, what we have here for Liberty House is a unincorporated church or ministry. So we have an ordained minister. We meet regularly. We do more of a community type building outreach, so to speak. So those are your different types of PMAs. And basically, after just working with David and doing a lot of reading and research on my own, and court cases and opinions and all that stuff, and really understanding how, one, the court system works, and legal reviews and case law and court opinions and looking and diving into some of these cases, going all the way back to Hale versus Hinkle. And I think that was like 18 something. I'm not positive. Let me see if I have that. I'm not positive off the top of my head, but it's a very old court case and it's been cited over 1,600 times. And it talks about the natural person, the artificial person, the right of privacy, and the right of association. Those things are kind of all intertwined into that case. That's kind of, I guess, what qualifies me, and the fact that I'm constantly reading and understanding. So I get a question a lot like, well, how do I do this? Or can I write my own? And absolutely, you could write your own PMA, just like you can write your own trust. You could even write your own will if you wanted to. You could write a trust on a cocktail napkin if it was short enough. But basically, it's just really understanding how everything that our forefathers put in place, how it all works together, and how that right of association is protected.
Aaron, could you elaborate a bit on you were talking about this. You've got the PHA, the PEA, and they could be faith-based or not. Could you dive a little bit deeper into the uses of PMAs?
Sure. So PMAs can be used for a lot of different things. And there's also times when they don't make sense. Maybe because somebody has to have a license or they don't want to give up their license. So like I use a plumber, for example, they need to get Settling. And usually to get Settling for their torches, I believe you still have to have a license for that. So unless you found another PMA that was providing Settling to its members and maybe giving welding classes, then that PMA can contract with the other PMA to get the Settling. But most cases, that's not going to be practical. Or like for myself, I also do real estate here in Connecticut. And I've had other people ask me, well, can I have my real estate company as a PMA? And I'm like, you could, but I don't think it'd be cost effective because every client you come in, you'd have to explain what a PMA is, and not everybody knows, and not everybody really cares either. There's some people that just live oblivious to what's going on around them. So where we see a lot of PMAs coming in is the community outreach part of it, or the community-based structure, whether it's like us, Liberty House, where we do different classes, or it's an intentional living community. We also see them a lot in like bakeries, or I just did a coffee place in Alabama, Pappy's Coffee. I think it was Alabama. Just finished up their documents. We see a lot of them in the health field. So your natural homeopathics, whether it's a chiropractor, somebody that deals with crystals, breathing techniques, Reiki, I think is how it's pronounced, that sort of thing. I've actually have been talking with a doctor and two RNs out of Ohio who prescribe ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and stuff like that. And they're looking to be set up as a PMA for their members and do telehealth and stuff like that. So there's a lot of uses to them, but again, not everybody falls into it. And the major difference between your faith-based, your ministries versus a standard PMA is that in the IRS tax code, there's a section called under the 501 section, where most churches are 501c3s, right? They're a state entity. They, have to bend to the knee of the state, or the will of the state rather. That's why a lot of churches closed down during the pandemic. That's why they're not allowed to speak about political people in their local area or what's going on in the world, because they agree to certain things when they get that 501c3. Now, in that tax code, if you can stand IRS tax code because it's so dry, and you dig through it a little bit, you'll come across something called 508c1a. Now, if you Google this, you'll see people selling quote unquote 508c1a churches or organizations. It's not a thing. And people always ask me, well, how do I get a 508? A 508 is not a thing. It's just tax code. And in your documents, your founding documents, we reference the 508c1a. And what that does is allow, and I'm not going to name all of them, but it's like churches, synagogues, temples, mosques, outbuildings, outposts, all regarding religious and faith-based, are automatically tax exempt. There's nothing to apply for. There's nothing to send to the IRS. And it just blows my mind more churches don't act like that, because then they could really be a part of the community like they used to be when you had your Black Robe Society and that sort of thing, where they're really out there bringing the community together, speaking against the wrongs that maybe the government's doing or the local government. So that's kind of the big difference. And by that, you have that tax benefit or that tax break. So that's a whole other conversation, whether you're a taxpayer or not. But if you are set up as a faith-based organization. Like I did a butchery in Arkansas, and what they did is they processed animals, whether you went out and shot your own deer, your moose, or what have you, or you went to their facility and you got cow from them. Because as a butcher, they can only sell like quarters and halves. They can't sell like ground beef and stuff like that. So what they did is they were set up as a faith-based organization where they could sell products to their members. And then they could also travel to their member's house, because it's a member of their PMA, and process their animals there. So if somebody had beef cattle on their homestead and they wanted it done, but they didn't want to bring the beef or the cattle, they could come there, and they did it to biblical standards, very similar to somebody that, you know, gets processed food that's kosher. So that's kind of how the PMAs are used in that aspect. But again, you know, really it takes like a 45-minute phone consultation with me to really see what your goal is, how you're going to be using the PMA, what's the purpose of it, that sort of thing. And I think PMAs are really good. I don't think they are the end all be all. There's other ways of still doing things. You could look at trusts or unincorporated trusts or offshore asset protection trusts. There's a whole bunch of things out there. It's just really understanding what you're looking to do and why you want to do it that way, and then seeing if the PMA is the best fit for you.
Aaron, in autonomy, we thrive on mistakes. Okay, we're always going on about how the fastest way to get to perfection is the more mistakes you make. So my next question is, what are some of the more common mistakes in establishing a PMA? What are things to avoid or watch out for?
Okay, so this is a great question, because everybody wants to, once they have their PMAs or we've talked, they're like, okay, well, I got to get my bank account set up because I need to be able to do transactions or, what have you. So I tell people you can get an EIN for banking purposes only. And as soon as I say that, when we get off the call, they run out and go get an EIN. And you're not supposed to have your EIN until you have your founding documents in place. So I tell them, okay, if you don't want to do that, then you can go the Liberty Dollar route, which is another PMA. And then what they do is there's certain things. This is where the Death Star analogy comes in, right? We have all seen Star Wars, or majority of us. Luke Skywalker shoots the 2 torpedoes. They go down that little tube and it blows up the Death Star, right? PMAs have little holes that can be pierced. And one of the big ones and the way they get pierced is, in one of the court cases that I bring up, it was the Boy Scouts of America versus this Cub Scout leader or Boy Scout leader who was homosexual. And the Boy Scouts didn't want him in there, so they used the right of association to boot him out. It got overturned in the appeals court because what they looked at as the Boy Scouts, yes, it is an association as a whole, but because they offer, quote unquote, the key words are public accommodation, right? You can walk into any Cub Scout office in your area and walk in and buy a t-shirt or buy ribbons or whatever it is that you need. So they offer that public accommodation, right? And they also don't have an exclusivity for boys joining the Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts of America. So if they were to have said, well, to be a Boy Scout, you need to be the age of 13 or 12 or whatever, and you need to have done so many hours of community service, it would have been more exclusive than, yeah, we'll take any boy into the Boy Scouts. So they said, no, you don't have that right of association in this aspect to stand upon, because you do offer that public accommodation and you don't have any exclusivity. So one thing I tell everybody when they're setting up, or once they have their PMA set up, is yes, you can advertise your PMA, you can advertise for membership, right? So if I say, hey, you want to come out to Liberty House and this is what we offer homeschooling, we offer preparedness classes, we offer radio communication, we do, bulk food orders, and we have festivals, and we help each other who, so we have somebody that sells bread and somebody that makes jam and elderberry syrup. So you can advertise for that to bring in membership, but you still have to have that exclusivity. So like we bring somebody in, most of the time it has to be somebody, now that we have our core members, it has to be somebody that's been referred to or quote unquote sponsored by somebody else, and they have to fill out a membership form. And then once we go through the membership form, the trustees vote on whether they want to let this person in or not, because it just takes one bad person to be like a cancer and destroy everything. But we also want to make sure if we are challenged, we can say, no, we have exclusivity. Here's our way for somebody to become a member. And no, we don't have public accommodations. We don't let the public come in and that sort of thing. So you need to make sure you have those covered. So then what poses a question is, well, I have a general store or like the butcher. We are going to have a storefront and we're going to have people driving by and coming over. Well, that's fine. But before they come in to buy anything, you need to greet them at the door and say, oh, I'm sorry, we're a private membership association. Would you like to join? It's a $1 membership fee, or the membership fee is included in your first purchase, or that sort of thing. And then you have them sign their membership agreement, and then you can let them come in and purchase things. One question I also get with that is, well, can I do this online? And yes, you can. You can have your membership agreement online. You just have to have, I guess the best way to explain this is I did this for a yoga studio outside of Boston, and he does yoga during the day. And then at night, he offers the small space to local performing artists, pianists, violinists, that sort of thing. And so if somebody wants to book time for his yoga class, they have to go in online, they have to put in all their information, they have to check off their hold harmless agreement, right? There's a little box, check mark that box, and there's a box that you can click on the hyperlink to read the membership agreement, or you can just click the box, check the box and say, yes, I've read it. That's considered a boilerplate contract. So it's assumed that you as an adult have read that contract and understand what it says, and then they can book their sessions. So it can be done online. It doesn't have to all be done in person or, in paper format. But you just want to make sure you're catching that information. You're making sure you're vetting who you're letting in and that sort of thing.
So the moral of the story is, if you're going to start a PMA, you better come to Aaron for some consultation so you can avoid these detrimental mistakes, right?
Yeah. And then I always reference a couple of the courses that aren't mine that just really, one, helps you understand how the court system works and takes you from the beginning to the end, because at some point your PMA is going to be challenged. I tell everybody that. It's just a matter of time, not when. And then the other thing too is one just on basic civics and the Constitution, and it's like 32 modules. It's really good. I don't know if you guys have anything like that within your programs that people can use, but we've seen people dive into the PMA and they don't know anything. They've watched a couple videos on YouTube. They want to sign up. Like I had one guy out in California paid $2,600 for what he thought was an unincorporated, non-statutory compliant, I think 508 church. And what he got was a statutory compliant church that was registered in Washington State, and it wasn't anything that he wanted. He never talked to anybody. He pushed a couple buttons and put it in a cart and hit buy now. And so he had to pay me to redo everything for him. I'm like, dude, you have a completely statutory church here. So if the state says you can't gather, you can't operate, then you can't, because you're referencing Washington State code and you have to adhere to that, as opposed to having something that is non-statutory compliant. The way I write them doesn't say that you're going to comply with any state, local, or federal regulations.
Very good. Okay, let's kind of talk about what it would actually look like to set up a PMA. Like, what would be the first steps? Like, as Joshua mentioned, for a school, for example, could you take us through like the structure of, if someone wanted to start their own PEA, what would that actually look like, from like the time frame, the steps they would take, and how hard is it to actually do? If you could kind of bring us through that, Aaron.
Yeah. So it starts with an initial consultation with myself, or if you don't go through me, make sure you vet the person who's writing the PMAs, because there's a lot of bad information out there. There's a lot of people that have, gotten a PMA and say, oh, I write PMAs, and all they're doing is swapping out their name of their PMA for yours and charging you a quick $250 or $500. I've also seen them all the way to $10,000, which is just ridiculous. But anyways, have a phone conversation with me, ask you a bunch of questions, use about 45 minutes. We have a conversation, answer all the questions you might have, and then I'll send over my agreement. And my agreement just basically outlines everything you're going to be getting from me, and also makes you a member of my East Coast PMA, which is a PMA set up to be able to create PMAs for other people. Then once I get that back, and that's going to have information on there like, what is going to be the name of your PMA? What type of PMA are we setting up? And a lot of this stuff we'll go over, and I'll take notes during the conversation. So I won't really need, you don't need to put that stuff in there, but it's there. The name of your trustees, and the minimum that you can have is 2, because everything's done on a 2/3 vote, and you really should have at least 3 trustees. I've done it up to, I think 5 is the max. The last one I just did was 5 trustees. So I need to know the legal name of all your trustees. If it's a faith-based or ministry, unincorporated ministry, then if there's any scripture or any positive affirmations that you want added into your documents, I would ask you for that. And then I usually get paid half up front, half on the back end, preferably in silver through Liberty Dollar, but I have other options also. And then it takes me about 7 to 10 days to write the founding documents. So it will be, depending on what you're getting, it would be your membership agreement, your bylaws, articles of organization. And then I send you a bunch of stuff on PMAs to really have a deep dive to understand it. It's different court cases, opinions, definitions like inalienable versus unalienable, what private is, that sort of thing. And then once you get all that, then you can go and then get your EIN if you need one for banking purposes only. You can do it right on the IRS website online. No, it does not put you back in the public, because one great thing about having a PMA is you can go back and forth, as far as the public versus private goes. And then once you have that, it is then finding a location to have your PEA. If you're going to have educators, how you're going to pay them. Are you going to 1099 on them? Is it going to be just a agreement between you and the educator and it's private? So some people look at it that way, like, I don't need to report anything. And that is something that the trustees and those people have to have as a conversation on their own. And then I always tell somebody, when I'm working with them, I don't know all the tax codes and laws. So look in your area to find somebody that understands about associations. It doesn't necessarily have to be private associations, just associations in general, and not like H&R Block or Liberty Tax or that guy spinning the thing outside by the gas station, right? You want to find a really good tax attorney or CPA that can help you when it comes to the tax end of it, because it is so different. I just can't stay up on that and answer that for everybody. Then you can start, once you have all that in your curriculum or however you're gonna teach, you can then start bringing in members. Now, obviously members have to be over the age of 18. So it's gonna be mostly parents coming in, signing up their kids to come in for some enrichment education. Maybe it's a drop off. Maybe they come 2 or 3 days a week. Maybe it's full time. It all depends on how the trustees want to run their private education association once they have the founding documents in place. Now, a couple of the things you have to worry about is if you don't own the building, right? The town might, like we've seen it in where is it? Bridgewater, Massachusetts. We've seen it in New Jersey. We've seen it in 2 places in Michigan where they've pushed back against the PEAs. And those have been the ones we've seen the most pushback against, because you're taking the kids out of public schools. They're losing money on those kids and it becomes a dollar thing. So now they're saying, oh, you're operating a unlicensed education or childcare facility or what have you. And we've won those cases. We still have some that are pending, but we've been winning them based on the documents that I've written and others within the circle, so to speak. So one thing you have to remember is if you don't own the building, you can't infringe on the rights of the building owner because they own that. It's a private building. And the difference between private and public is private is, well, I guess the easiest way to put it is public is paid for by tax dollars, paid for, maintained. So your libraries, your schools, your rec facilities, those are all public places. When it comes to private places, we kind of lose some of our rights because we can't infringe on that person's right that owns that building. So they don't necessarily will come after the PMA. Sometimes they go after the building owner first, saying, oh, you're allowing an unlicensed child care facility to operate here and so forth. And you'll get a cease and desist and that sort of thing. And then we just kind of bang it out in court and that's about it. So that's kind of how you get them set up. And then, everybody obviously that comes through, like you could do an open house and then have everybody sign a 1-day membership agreement so they understand what a PMA is or a PEA. But majority of the time, the people that are seeking you out already know what PEAs are, and they're just looking for somebody to fill that void. I think in Connecticut, we have like 4 or 5 PEAs right now. And as far as I know, none of them have been challenged. And 90% of the time they go under the radar. But it just, every once in a while they get challenged, and it seems to be like, because I'm involved with so many, it seems that it's been happening more so, but nothing in Connecticut yet. But definitely New Jersey, Massachusetts have been the problem childs. And then once you have your members come in, you just start running the education association the way you and your trustees see fit. So whether you're, doing stuff outdoors or you're doing, stuff inside more of a formal classroom, that's completely up to the educators and the trustees of the PMA or PEA in this case.
Okay, so getting challenged. Let's look at that again. Joshua's thrown in the question, and it's a very good one. When you mentioned some people have been challenged when they haven't, could you elaborate a little bit on what that looks like? When they do get challenged.
Yeah, it takes up a lot of my time. We've been doing a lot with these lately. So, and I'll use the lady in New Jersey as that's the most recent one that we've won. So, and we've had other people that have been challenged. And they're just like, that's it. I don't know enough. I'm shutting down. I don't have the money to hire an attorney, or I don't want to know how the court system works on my own. So, because I didn't take my advice and go through some courses or read. So basically what had happened is this lady had a daycare facility for years, I guess. And she decided to say, okay, well, I can't have kids in here without wearing masks. I'm not putting masks on kids. So I'm shutting down. I'm going to reopen as a ministry that provides education to its members. Simple enough, right? So shuts everything down, closes out her LLC, everything like that, reopens. Kids start getting dropped off. Everything's going great. And then it's their version of, I think they still have DCF, or Department of Children and Family Services in New Jersey, or whatever they call it down there, catches wind. And they're like, hey, you said you closed, but you have kids coming in here. And they said, right, we're unincorporated ministry. We're also a private, we're a private unincorporated ministry that's providing education to our members. And they're like, well, we want to come in. They're like, no, you're not coming in here because you're not a member. Now, me personally, I would have been like, sure, sign the membership agreement and you can come in, because there's wording in there that doesn't allow somebody to come in a official capacity, whether it's, for investigation purposes or what have you, to build a case against the PHA or PEA. So they said, no, you're not coming in here. You have no standing here. You have no right here. This is a private association. It's a unincorporated, ministry. We're providing services to our members. We're not open to the public. We're not providing that public accommodation, right? Keyword. So they said, okay. They said, fine. They left. They came back another day with another person. So it was two people this time. Tried to get in again. They said, nope. The educators that were there were really on point and said, no, we're not letting you in. So then they started parking outside and counting how many kids were coming and how many parents were dropping off, how long they were there for. And so this goes on for a little while, and then basically they get a cease and desist, and she just pretty much rebuts it and says, no, I'm not stopping what I'm doing. You have no standing here. And then they've got an injunction against them, I believe is what came next. And basically what they worded when I was speaking with her first constitutional quote unquote attorney, they had said that there is and this is the key word that everybody here needs to remember, that there is a clear and present danger to the children for not wearing masks. Now, that's where the state or the government can come in if your PMA is creating a clear and present danger or substantial evil. And there's a clear and present danger test that was, do I have it here? The guy who did it. Let me see if I have it. I may not. Yeah, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes defined the clear and present danger test in 1919. So it's been around for a very long time. And basically they use that key term to get the court to say, okay, well, this is now going to have a case and we're going to go to court and we need you to stop. So she did stop for a little while until it started to go, work its way through the court system. So then a bunch of us got on, other advisors. David got on a Zoom call with her and her attorney. And unfortunately, this attorney wanted to fight the whole mask thing. And I tried to tell him, I said, nobody right now in the midst of this pandemic is going to turn around. No judge is going to say, yes, masks don't work and it doesn't matter, right? What I told him he needs to go after is, well, one, if they've never been allowed in there, how do they know the kids are not wearing masks and they're not getting masks through the door? And two, if they do know that the kids aren't wearing masks and they've never been given entrance to the building, then that means they were looking through windows, possibly taking photos, and that's a form of voyeurism, which is a U.S. code, which is a criminal offense. So they should be getting arrested, and a criminal complaint should be filed against them in their personal capacity, not their capacity as a DCF worker or whatever they were at that point. He said, no. He kind of put him back on his heels a little bit. He goes, no, we're going to go after the mask thing. So she went through a few more attorneys, and this went on for a few months. And then it finally came back where they realized that she wasn't going to back down. She knew where she was standing firmly in her right of association. She was referencing other court cases, and it came down to all of a sudden the state of New Jersey came back and said, oh, by the way, we found this obscure code that is, we're going to allow you to operate as a unincorporated church and ministry and allow you to continue to educate your members' children. Oh, and by the way, here, just sign this paper and don't sue us. And so when she told me that, I said, you should have sued the crap out of them because you would have won. But she just wanted it to go away. And she goes, sure, I'll leave you alone. You leave me alone, basically. And that's where it went. But that all happened when she got to court. They started looking at her bylaws, her articles of organization, her membership agreement. She was keeping minutes of the meetings with the trustees, and everything they were doing, she was still doing stuff up to standards, up to the codes for regular schools and stuff like that. It's not like she was cutting corners or anything. She just didn't want to have to put the kids in masks, and she didn't want to have the overreach of the government saying, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. And so that's kind of where one of the cases that we went through the whole thing, and we're basically going through the same thing in a couple other states. I'm actually was talking to an attorney out of Colorado yesterday, a lady named Beth, who I'm going to be helping her with some stuff out there with another ministry that's being challenged as, they are challenging the pastor and the church basically for providing education, just the same thing to its kids' members, because Colorado's got some really weird laws, but basically saying that because a certain amount of the education wasn't biblical, then they're not operating as a church, basically is what they're trying to say. So, they'll play their games, but she's hoping that we can take this all the way to the Supreme Court and get a ruling on it if it goes far enough, because then that'll give us really good standing when it comes to ministries that are unincorporated, because there's a lot about associations. There's not as much about churches and ministries and the separation and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was a great example. So she fired that first attorney then.
She went through 3.
Okay. That was brilliant. The way you looked at that and took that and turned that around, and at the peak of that pandemic, good thinking. I mean, there's no judge that was going to say, masks, because they all, for the most part, it would be detrimental to them. That was a brilliant,
correct,
brilliant example. Another question. This is kind of going back to this is about hiring. What about paying other people doing jobs under your PMA? Like, how would the teachers get paid in a PEA, for example?
So that really depends on how the trustees want to do it. Some people have PMAs set up and they don't, they're not looking to get the tax benefits of having a faith base. So they don't mind paying taxes because maybe they're a little worried about the IRS. So they file stuff. It really is an individual decision. So majority, we see people doing 1099. So they're contracted employees, just like myself as a realtor. I work for a brokerage, and I don't, I'm not hired. I work for the brokerage, but I'm not part of the brokerage. Does that make sense? So they issue me a 1099 at the end of the year. I have to set my money aside for taxes and that sort of thing. So it could be the same thing in a PEA. They could say, okay, well, we're going to pay you, $1,000, every 2 weeks or a week or whatever it's going to be. And then at the end of the year, we're going to issue a 1099, and you as an individual person, that's where you have to decide. So I have to say, okay, well, I'm Aaron. Am I a taxpayer? And what does it mean to be a taxpayer under the IRS code? And that's a whole nother, rabbit hole to go down, considering what a person is when they talk about taxes. But then that person would just, file their 1099 and do their taxes because, somebody might want to buy a house or a vehicle and they need to show where their income's coming from, right? So that's one way of doing it. And then we have others that say, well, absolutely not. This is a private contract. It's between members of the PEA. And if, just no different than if I had a nephew come over and mow my lawn for the summer, I'm like, hey, here's $500 for the summer, mow my lawn every other week. Whatever he does with that money after that is completely up to him. More than likely, he's not going to report it. It's just going to go in his pocket and he's going to go spend it, right? So you can also look at it that way. Again, this is why I tell everybody, because if I say one thing, people run off and like, oh, Aaron said, and this is how I'm going to do it. You need to look at what works best for you in your situation, for your PEA. Talk to a tax advisor or a tax attorney in your area. And there is one company that I've reached out to and I'm waiting to hear back, but they understand what 508s are. I heard them in a podcast and they're like, yeah, we do taxes for people. And, we deal with 508s. And I'm like, okay, well, now that's a resource that I can direct people to. So, it's still a learning process every day, and putting, things together for people and saying, hey, here's a good constitutional attorney that you can use, or you can ask questions to. She may not be licensed in your area, but she could tell you the overview, that sort of thing. So it is important for somebody to understand stuff in their area. But those are kind of the ways it's done. So if you really wanted to add even more of anonymity to it, as where money's coming and going from, and you didn't want to use, Cash App or Venmo because it's reported, or PayPal, Zelle's an option. And then what we use a lot of Liberty Dollar, and that's another PMA that offers banking-like services, but it's all backed by silver, which is kind of cool. So that's even more of a level of privacy, so to speak. So again, unfortunately, when it comes to PEAs or PMAs in general, there's no, oh yeah, this works for you, or this could, it's really all individual. And that's what makes them so great is, one person might say, yeah, I'll pay taxes, I'm not worried about that. Or one person might say, yeah, I'm going to just do 1099s for everybody. And then somebody else might be like, you know what? Like, I buy sourdough bread from one of our members who makes it and sells it, and she does it right in her home, and I'm not worried about it. It's great bread. I have no problem paying her, and whatever she does with the money after I pay her is up to her, whether she, reports it or not. And that's between her and I, and that's what makes it so great. And that's how it should be, right? Because we aren't large corporations or anything like that.
Excellent, Aaron. Well, that is a very good. We've covered a lot of the basics there. I want to move on to taking. I'm going to read a few questions from the class that they have submitted in the last few days. I will. Let's see. We've got setting up what is called a freedom cell as an entity that provides homesteading type skills training. So like a group of people getting together that wants to do that. How could a PMA be applied to that type of group, like the pros and cons, with consideration to some of what Verstappen talked about? I'm reading Adam's question.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah, any elaboration there?
Mutual aid groups.
Mutual aid groups. Thank you, Joshua.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. It's more of that community-based building, right? Like Liberty House is a community-based ministry here. You could just do a standard PMA unless you had a faith amongst your members. Like, maybe you all agree that, the Bible is the rock upon which this republic was founded on. I can't remember which president said that now, but, that sort of thing. And yeah, you could set up we'll just use PMA in general, a PMA. All your members would become, all the people in that freedom cell would become members of that PMA. And then you don't have to really worry about, for the most part, if, like, let's say lockdowns come back, right? Like, we all know they're coming. They're already talking about it. West Coast is already starting to do it. We're seeing it around the world. They're priming us for it, and let's say you have my real estate office, we had people here, and we had more than 4 people gathering at that time, and somebody comes and knocks on the door and they're like, hey, you can't be doing this. And we're like, no, yes, we can. We're a private membership association. So right now you're trespassing onto our private area. We'd ask you to leave, come back with your warrant if you want, or have your supervisor come out here and I'll have that conversation with them. And really, this is where it becomes important to understand where you can assert yourself and say, no, I have the right to associate, and the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and your stupid statutes or your emergency codes or whatever you want to call them, emergency orders, does not supersede my inalienable rights or unalienable rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, the right of association, that sort of thing. So I think that's a great idea. That's one of our goals as one of the persons that helped set up PMAs, is to get, we're working slowly on a list of PMAs across the US and Canada. So if I need goat's milk or soap or toothpaste, I know where I can go and get it and who makes it. Even if it's in with their home, you could do the same thing with the freedom cells. Get other people on board, getting groups together. Maybe you meet up and you do a canning class. Maybe you do a wilderness or foraging class. These are all different classes we do within our ministry here in Connecticut. So, there's a lot you can do within it. And the benefit is when everything goes to crap again, because, the government's trying to control everything, and you can just sit back and be like, go ahead, doesn't apply to me. I'm doing this in a private capacity with members who are agreeing to meet. And if any of your students want some stuff, I'm sure we'll get in my contact information. I have some really good PDFs that you can read that I've highlighted that really talk about association, how it benefits the republic, or a republic, and how it really helps bringing people together. So I don't want to have to read it verbatim. I got it on here somewhere, but let me see if I can pull up the one that talks about it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So any PDFs that you be willing to share, how could we just send it to Joshua, and we could, or how would you suggest?
Yeah, is there a chat on here that I can drop stuff in? Maybe not.
No, it's turned off on this account, but
okay.
You can
I mean, people can just email me if they want, and I'll email it off to them. I'm good with that. Or if they're in the Telegram group, let me know. I don't put all this stuff in the Telegram group just because it's kind of more for people that end up getting PHAs or PMAs or PEAs, so they really have an understanding. But there's a lot of good stuff here, and it all references different court cases and stuff like that to back it up.
Yeah, and Adam's question definitely resonates with me as well, because I fantasize about that kind of mutual, because that's what I'm out in East Texas, and we're a lot of small mutual aid groups, and it's a combination of homeschooling and homesteading and all projects involved we're in. So we're talking about it, and we're like, but what would be the best one? And you could open several PMAs. You could have a few going at the same time, couldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can have,
why not?
A PHA, a PEA, a PMA. They can all contract with each other. Everybody can be members of different ones. You could do just, like I've been talking to some people up in Vermont that want to, they've got some acreages. They want to put up some yurts and have more of an intentional living community, or where people can come in, members, and Airbnb something without having to go through Airbnb, right? It's all private. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. One of the PDFs here that I have, this one's really good. It's called the Notes of Judicial Protection of Membership in Private Associations. And it highlights a bunch of really good information. I give this to people that get PMAs because I'm like, it really gives you an idea of where you get your powers from when having an association. But yeah, I think that's a great idea to have, different PMAs, and maybe each PMA, if you're talking about the mutual aid, one might be, I did 20 years in the Air Force. So maybe one of it's like a combat medic course, or a TCCC course where it's, basic first aid and immediate trauma care, putting on a tourniquet and that sort of thing. And maybe you have another one that's, the association's really good about, food processing, canning, long-term storage. You could do all that type of stuff. Definitely.
Yeah, the reference to Verstappen earlier was a man who was working with the autonomy class, and he created a course on creating mutual aid groups, and he was very big into the types of groups you just mentioned, like a search and rescue group, or even like Meals on Wheels, these kind of things. There's a lot of examples. The potential here definitely is immense, Aaron. I've got another question here. I think this is from Justin. I'm not sure, but these are great questions we're looking at. How can a PMA hold assets such as vehicles? How does that interface with registration/insurance on quote unquote public roads? And he also threw in, how does the transfer of these assets work in practical entrepreneur sense? And then it goes on, can I only trade with members? Can I sell or sign certificate of title to a private party? Would I have to recruit a buyer to the PMA to do business? So,
all right, that's a loaded question. Yeah, so what I like about PMAs is they work very similar to a trust. So if you have any idea about a trust, whether it's an irrevocable or revocable trust, PMAs can hold assets. So it can hold banking accounts, checking accounts, gold, silver, land, vehicles if you wanted to. Now, I haven't done anything with vehicles personally, but the way it would work would be just like a house. If you had a land and a house that you wanted to put into the PMA, it would just be, the title would be signed over to one of the trustees of the PMA. It would be in the PMA name. and then you would go register it. If you wanted to register it, that's a whole other topic, because we have the right to travel. And if you want to fight, and this is what I tell people, listen, if you want to have that battle, go for it. Take the tags off your car, drive around and fight around every corner about why you're traveling without plates and that sort of thing. You can definitely do it. Just be prepared for the fight. That's all. I tell people, be prepared and only take on so many fights at one time. So the PMA would be would be on register for the vehicle, no different than if you had an LLC or an S Corp or anything like that, and the vehicles were owned by that company. It's the same process. Same thing for land or anything like that. It would be a warranty deed, depending on what you have in your area, or a quit claim deed, where let's say it'd be Aaron Bowman warranties that, everything that goes along with a warranty deed to that property, with the property address, the property legal description, and then it would be signed by the trustees, whether it's 2 trustees, 3 trustees, and then it would be the PMA name, trustees, just like if it was a corporation or LLC or a sole proprietorship, anything like that. Or if it was a trust, very similar, like so-and-so trustee signs, on behalf of the trust. The trustee has that power to maintain those assets for the beneficiary. It's the same thing with the PMA. You have the trustees that are taking in these assets for the members to benefit from.
All right, very good. Another question. I think, I'm pretty sure you've already touched on this. You did talk about this, but I'll just in case. Is it practical? Is it practical to consider something like a dealer/shop as a PMA? Now, you were mentioning this versus like the plumber may not be a good idea. I don't know. That's the question.
Right. So could you? Absolutely. You could have a dealership that's a PMA, but at the end of the day, if you're trying to put food on the table and keep the roof over your head, is it easier for you to operate as a regular LLC to have everybody coming in off the street than it would be to have to explain to everybody what a PMA is, and then having them become members and then doing all the transactions privately that way? And then if you were selling, let's say, cars, would that then throw up red flags? And now you have to start battling with the local government because they have no idea what you're doing for the most part. Most of the people in those positions are just placed there by a friend, and they push paper. So you really have to look at it as, okay, is it going to be beneficial for me to operate this way? Now, if you're considering the lockdowns and stuff like that, well, then maybe you have a PMA in place, and the majority of your business is done through the LLC, S Corp, or whatever entity you have currently going. And then when lockdowns come, okay, well, I'm shutting that part down, and now I'm operating as a PMA. You can have 2 going at the same time. It's just that it just creates more work, because now you have to have separate accounts, separate books, all that stuff. So you're doing twice the amount of work. So it really depends on the situation for the person and how much they're willing to put into it or fight and that sort of thing.
Very good. Let's talk about land. This next question looks very interesting. Okay. Someone said, I had heard on an interview that a 508c3, which holds land as an asset, can submit a request to the IRS to remove that land from their public records. Is this true?
So, yes, if you have a ministry or faith-based organization and you're utilizing the 508c1a tax code, it's and I'm going to be doing this probably for my next property that I buy, because we had just recently sold. Sorry, somebody's just walking by my office just trying to see who it is. Yeah, basically what would happen is you just go, it doesn't even have to go to the IRS. It's literally you start the lowest level, and that's your tax assessor's office. So you can walk in there with all your documents and everything, say, hey, listen, I'm a faith-based organization, or I'm an unincorporated church and ministry. This property has now been deeded over to the ministry. They're on record, and I would like it removed from the tax roll. And they're probably going to be like, nope. Okay, well, let me talk to your supervisor. And then you just keep going up the chain until you get it off. And again, they don't want to take you off because now they're losing money. And again, this comes into where, do you fit the definition of a taxpayer? There's a guy I've gotten a lot of information from, and this guy, Steve, he's really good. He's out of Florida. He does a lot with taxes. And his whole thing is, okay, just because I buy a piece of property, I'm now a homeowner, I'm now paying taxes on that property. Now, let's say the house is paid for free and clear, right? And now you're still paying taxes $5,000 a year. Why am I paying taxes on something if I'm not producing anything there, right? Taxes on buildings and property or for corporations, public or private. And majority of us, unless we have a home-based business or we're producing stuff out of our house, the only thing that, as he puts it, that goes on there is monkey business. So you can't tax monkey business, right? So majority of the people shouldn't be paying taxes in the first place because we don't fall under the definition of a taxpayer. And again, that's a whole nother ball of wax, rabbit hole, whatever you want to look at. But it's as simple as saying, okay, yes, I'm now a unincorporated church ministry. I'm a faith-based organization, and starting with a tax assessor and just going in there with all your documents and your warranty deed, showing that now the ownership of it is with a faith-based organization. And by law, it should be coming off the tax roll. And that's where the fight begins, at the lowest level.
Let's talk about external from the USA. Someone's asked this very good question. I was curious myself about this one. Can PMAs exist outside the country, for example, Mexico or Canada?
Canada, yes. I've never done anything in Mexico. I don't know what their constitutions look like or what they have down there for documents. I know some exist in Australia. I didn't set them up. I just helped a lady go over her documents. She kind of did it herself. She had a yoga studio over there. And she got a whole bunch of fines, and the fines eventually went away. But yes, we actually bring in our documentation, because we are, bordering Canada, that, especially people up in that area might have a crossover. So we add in there the Canadian Charter of Rights. And there's certain things which in there that are very similar to our Constitution, but again, we have to work with whatever that country has. And I've really, honestly, personally never done them outside of Canada and the US. I just talked to somebody about Costa Rica, and I'm still trying to figure out if it would work and how it would hold up there. But I know, our Constitution and our Bill of Rights is really, really amazing, and it affords us a lot of things that other countries don't have. But the Canadian Charter of Rights is very similar, and so we basically bring that into our documents when we're writing our documents. And then the uniform code. Now I got to pull it up because I can't remember it off the top of my head. Give me 1 second here, and I'll pull it up just so I can tell you what it is, because I know I'm going to forget. Let's see. Let's see, where is it? Yes, there it is. Okay, so we also reference the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I know some people don't like that because it's part of the UN, but it does have some things in there, and I guess the UN can take it away at any time. But if somebody's coming in from a different country and joins your PMA, and maybe they're not a US citizen and they're in the States or in Canada, then we reference that, because there is some things in there that offer rights or freedoms and associations, but it's not guaranteed like the US stuff is. And then, like I said, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Bylaws. So those are some of the things that we pull into our founding documents when we're writing them. So if you are challenged, you can say, no, here, look, this is what we're standing under. And, again, when I say there's others out there that quote unquote do PMAs or unincorporated churches and stuff like that, you have to be careful, because I've seen some of the major, I guess we'll call them players, some people that, charge $10,000 for these documents. And their claim to fame is that they'll help represent you in court, which I don't understand how they do that unless they just basically tell you what to do as a pro se litigant. But it was for somebody that was in Texas. Actually, they had a business in Texas, and I'm like, well, send me over your documents. Let me take a look at them, because I was like, I'm not familiar with how they do things. And it referenced stuff in Vermont Constitution. I'm like, well, that doesn't work, because that's in Vermont, and you're in Texas. You need to reference the Texas Constitution, because all 50 states have their own constitution, which is very similar to the U.S. Constitution. So you want to make sure that you are getting your documents from a reliable source. And so I've seen them from one place that was charging $275 for a private membership association, but then they would also sell you stuff on the secure party creditor, the UCC, a lot of what I call Patriot Mythology and a few others. So just be careful who you're getting it from and make sure you can actually talk to somebody. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent. I forgot what the question was.
No, that's fine. I want to ask you a bit before I forget the UK. I want to throw that up there, but you just led to something that made me think of a question. Like, what is a price range? Like, if someone is, what should be a red flag if someone's being charged way too much or even way too little? What would be a decent range for these kind of paperwork for somebody starting this?
So if you go, like, I know some of the people know of David Edwards. He's been on a few different podcasts and stuff like that. The guy that kind of introduced me to all this. If you go to him or any of his advisors or anything like that, you're going to see the same pricing across the board. And it's anywhere between 14 and 2,400, depending on what you're getting. Then you'll see others that will charge, a few $100s. One guy I saw pushing during this whole pandemic was affidavits, and you get my affidavit for $250 and you'll never have to wear a mask and do this and that. And I'm like, that's not what affidavits are. They're just sworn testimony. They could be complete hearsay, but it's just sworn, right? So normally those get thrown out of court unless the person's there to be cross-examined. So I'm like, people are just wasting their money. But again, people were panicking. They were looking for an out. They were looking for that silver bullet. You had a bunch of people start following some of these state nationals that are out there. I don't want to throw names out unless it's okay, but I have a lot of people calling me and say, well, I'm changing my status. That's it doesn't matter, right? It's just people prey, unfortunately, on others that are looking for ways either out of the system or to alleviate some pressure. And PMAs is a way to remove some of that pressure. And then understanding how everything was written by our founding fathers and how laws work, and everything's written beautifully, as I've heard a few other people refer to it that way. But we just don't know how to use it. And like I was talking about that lady in New Jersey with the PEA and ministry. If we're always on the defense, we're never going to be able to put any pressure on the overreach. And once you start putting pressure on these people that are in these positions that are overreaching and coming outside that box of limited government, and you start going after them with criminal complaints and really putting that pressure on, that changes the tune a little bit. So, unfortunately, people don't know that because we're not taught civics anymore, right? I had to learn all this stuff in my 40s for the most part, and later on in life, I started learning this stuff and really understanding it more because it's just not taught in school, but just be careful. Yeah. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And, for me, like, I've broken payments up into payment plans. I've done everything because I don't want anybody to think that I can't have a private membership association because I can't afford it. I'm not in it for the money. I charge because it takes time away from my family. Like, my wife's already called me once since we've been here, right? So probably like, wait, where are you? When are you coming home? I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it for people to understand where they can start to assert themselves, because we are in a limited government. Our government doesn't have the say all, end all, be all. We're not in a dictatorship. We're in a republic, and
I just because it's such a new concept for people approaching it. If someone's looking into this and getting offered some paperwork and they're charging $10,000, not to say it won't work or they're not legit, but you better do a bit. That's over the average range. That's just kind of what I was getting at. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And what about the company? Let me just touch on that real quick. The company that does that, or the organization that sets those up, they've been around for a very long time. And the father originally ran the organization, and he, I've never talked with the daughter, but, I don't know where it has gone from where he initially started it. But, the majority of the language in their documents was good when I was reading it. There were certain things that stood out to me. I'm like, well, why are you in Texas, but we're referencing the Constitution of Vermont? Like, there were certain things like that that just didn't make sense to me. And, so just you just got to be careful. Like I said, if it's too good to be true, it is probably.
Yeah, I was just about to say, just got to be careful. And you said it. You beat me to it, Aaron. Back to international affairs. I was going to ask you, have you heard or do you know anything of the UK? The reason I'm asking is we have a lot of British nationals in the autonomy group. So I know they'll be wondering, mostly American, Canadians, Australians, but we have members of autonomy all over the world, literally. But we do have a good handful from the UK as well. Have you heard anything about that over there?
I don't know anybody over there. I've had a few conversations with individuals, but considering the majority of our common law came from England, I'm sure there's stuff that we can utilize over there. But again, they're under, the crown, so it's different than here. I don't personally know how much protection it would provide because you do have a different system, but I'm sure there's got to be something there. I would just have to dig into it and bounce it off of David and a few others probably. So if you do have somebody that's in the UK that's in autonomy, I'd be more than happy to look into that. But again, I can't say how much actual protection it's going to give you based on their documents over there, because a lot of our stuff came from there, but a lot of our stuff is actually different. Like, we had a lot of our Constitution came from a lot, it was like 400 years of different documents came together to make our Constitution. So yeah, there's stuff there. I can't, it would just be wrong for me to say yes. I'd have to look into it.
This next question is, in my opinion, this is a great question. And it is, I think we all have our suspicions as to why. But the question is, why haven't we heard of this before?
We haven't needed it. Basically, we haven't, unless you live down south, like you're in Texas, there's still dry counties down there and other states. We just haven't had a need for it, right? We've been able to live pretty much in a bliss, without really paying attention to a lot of things that are going on until this whole pandemic happened. And all of a sudden we can't go to the grocery store. There's no toilet paper. Now we're being told supply chain issues and no food. And I mean, hell, you got New York having TV commercials for biological nuclear attacks. Like seriously, like their programming is ridiculous at this point. And so now people are like, okay, I know there's something wrong, but how do I deal with it? Or how do I, assert my rights that I know are there, but I just can't articulate it enough. And that's where you really have to start digging in, because they just want us fat, dumb, and lazy. And that's unfortunately our school systems and CRT and everything else. And, it's a mess, but hopefully we start getting enough people involved and getting back into, not what the Supreme Court says today, but what our actual founding fathers wrote about and what their words were, not some opinion of some judge out of Ohio. I don't care what he says. I want to know what John Adams said and Ben Franklin and Lincoln and all these others that were there that did different things to build our country to what it is. I don't want opinions. I want to hear it from their mouths. And that's important that people read the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. There's a lot of good stuff in there, but you just got to bear through the Old English and read it.
Very good, Aaron. I'm going to open it up to the class now.
Fire away.
Aaron, thank you so much. First of all, this is wonderful. I'd like a little bit more elucidation, if you don't mind, on the two courses that you mentioned, the civics basics and how court system works. Where can I find those?
So I can, I'll email you the links to them, but one is through Dr. Graves. He's still a practicing attorney, I believe, out of Florida. And he's in his early 70s, mid 70s. I've talked to him a few different times. He has a course called, he goes by the Jurisdictionary online. It's How to Win in Court Without a Lawyer. It's a fantastic course. I've used it myself personally. I just, I'm getting too personal, just beat my ex-wife's attorney in court at trial. So dealing with some kid stuff. And it was probably the best $250 I've ever spent online in my entire life. It is written really easy to understand. So everything from a complaint to your motions, your affirmative defenses, and it really breaks everything down for you. So and it gives you examples of how to write stuff. And then it tells you how to research. And then I think it's got like 5.5 hours of audio or video, and then 2.5 hours of audio or video. I can't remember exactly, but that one's really good. And then the other one is she's also an attorney. She's got a decent podcast that really goes into stuff. Like I just put it in the Telegram group. She talks about private and public, which is great. and how it works. But that's Chris Ann Hall, and she has Liberty First Society. .com, I think it might be. But she's got like 32 modules, and it's everything from different articles of the Constitution to the separation of powers and everything like that. And it's all from the viewpoint of not her opinion, but what the founding fathers had written and how they meant it to be. So those are the two courses I tell people to get outside of, just getting the PMA set up.
Great. Thank you very much. I've noticed that law is so much about definition and precedent. Thank you.
Yeah. Pick yourself up a Black's Law Dictionary. If you don't have one, I have them in a PDF format. I'm more than happy to send them out to people. And then the other thing, if you can get a copy, I actually was in our local law library and just happened to stumble upon this book, and it's the Constitutional Law Desk book, and it has a ton of information in there. So it has like the right of association, and then it gives you the significance and court cases about it. It gives you the enjoyment of assembly. That's in another section. It talks about freedom of association and the NAACP versus Alabama, which is another significant case. Equal protection and privacy, like the right of privacy. Like there's so much in this book. I think I picked it up on Amazon. Unfortunately, I had to go through them, but I picked it up, I think, for like maybe $60, $70. And the amount of information in there, it's fantastic. And this is what people need to know. Like, yeah, there is like a right of association. Here are the court cases, here's the significance of why this is an important court case. And it just breaks it down for you. We even have one here in Connecticut that's referenced a lot, and that was Griswold versus Connecticut with schooling. So, but yeah, there's definitely some good resources out there. You just gotta, know where to dig for them.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Who's next?
Who else has a question? Don't be shy. Unmute yourselves.
There's no way I answered everybody's questions tonight. Absolutely not.
Well, in the meantime, I'll throw one out there, Aaron.
Sure.
From the time someone decides to start a PMA, let's do it. Everybody gets around, rallies, and says, yeah, they do their chant and all that, to the time it is actually goes into effect. What is the average time involved? Are we talking a few weeks, a month, a year? You brought us through the process earlier, but what is the average time frame involved?
Depending on how much I have going on in my personal family life, my 2 jobs, no, it usually takes about 7 to 10 days, depending on how many I'm writing. I try to get them done fairly quickly. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer because you'll get a rough draft. You'll go through the rough draft. If there's any changes you want, or maybe I misspelled a trustee's name or something like that because I got the spelling wrong or what have you, or, we'll get the rough draft. You'll go through that. And then if there's any change that you made, and then sometimes people, by the time they get the rough draft, they're like, oh, no, my mission statement's changed. I have a different mission statement that I want in there. I'm like, okay, well, I'll just swap one out for the other. And then once that's done, then you usually have them about, 10 days, and you get your final copy, and then a whole bunch of other stuff to read along.
That's super fast. If you'd said 7 to 10 weeks, that I would have been like, okay, yeah, that's good to know. So it seems like the most difficult part for someone starting the PMA would be the build up before they actually contact you, deciding what they're going to do and where and all of those specifics. That would take longer than actually setting it up.
Yeah, that usually does, because keep in mind, if you're going to have your PMA, regardless of what type it is, you're going to have your trustees, whether it's 2, 3, 4. And then if you're going to start putting assets in that, like let's say I take my house and I put my assets in there, and then, I might be the chair and there's co-trustees, but if I lose on a 2/3 vote that I don't want to sell my property, it could technically get sold because that's what the PMA has agreed on. So it's really important to have people in there that you can trust, whether it's a wife, friend, cousin. Like, with Liberty House, there's myself, Anna, Melissa. We had a 4th, Ryan, but he had some personal stuff going on in his life, and so he stepped down. So we just brought it to a vote at a meeting, and it was unanimous, and recorded our minutes. That's another thing I don't think we touched on, is you have to have either annually, semi-annually, monthly, quarterly, meetings of the trustees, and then record those minutes just like you would at any like executive board meeting or anything like that. So again, also with the PMA, you could have, like with us, we have a advisory board, and it's made up of our most active members. So That way there, we're not trying to all meet with all the members all the time. We'll meet with the advisory board. I think we're doing it quarterly now, and it brings up ideas for doing festivals or whatever we're doing, different classes, foraging classes, what have you. And then that all gets put out to, the members in minutes of the meeting. We'll put out an email out to everybody, that sort of thing.
You mentioned the UCC code earlier. I've always heard about this code, and I think you referred to it as being like mythological or something. Like, is there any truth to that whole UCC type of law?
So the UCC does exist as a uniform commercial code. It's just that commercial code. Unless you're a business and a lot of people try to use that along with some other things. And I don't want to turn this into that whole topic, but basically the UCC is set up there for businesses, and I'm not a business. You're not a business. Now, some people say, well, when you were born, your placenta was left at the hospital. The government created an all capital letters name, which is a whole nother identity. There's a trust set up with all this money in it. And so that's how you use the UCC and, that sort of thing. And one, I've never seen it work. Two, you get people out there that are selling these courses on this stuff. And what I have seen is people go to jail for wire fraud and stuff like that across state lines because they try to access some secret account that the government had put there in place. And to me, I've heard one individual kind of talk about that a little bit, but it was more of a natural person versus an artificial person. And that's, again, was brought up in Hale versus Hinkle. And it's, like I said, been cited over 1,600 times. But that whole UCC, your birth certificate, changing your status, getting a passport filled out a certain way, it's just, I've seen a lot of people talk about it. I had a conversation with this lady here in Connecticut the other day who's spent a lot of time. I think she had like 7 folders full of notes. Like, she had a stack, and we were talking PMAs, and she's like, well, I'm changing my status. And I'm like, good for you. If it works, let me know, because I've yet to see anybody that actually has done it, as opposed to, I don't want to use the word charlatan, but I will, these charlatans selling, this stuff at the local Motel 6 ballroom where they have these people come in and talk. And again, to me, I feel like they're preying on people's, being scared or worried about what's going on with the government and overreach. And, it's like, I kind of refer to it as like when I used to go to some of these real estate seminars, and they'd have somebody come in about house flipping, and they got the music going, and they're like, yeah, a guy comes out and tells you he's ragged to riches story, and then like some dude or some lady jumps up in the back like, I'm buying your course, and runs up and pretends to buy it for $10,000 or whatever. And you have kind of the same thing going on here, is the way I see it, because I've yet to see anybody show me a court case. Yeah, here you go, I've changed my status, I'm a state national. Look, we're all sovereign people. We're all sovereign people of our state. I've never relinquished any of my unalienable rights. I've never given any of that stuff away. And one, you can't unless they're inalienable rights. But again, it's understanding how the system works and civics works and the court system, and standing, with what was left for us by the founding fathers. And again, it's, people just kind of prey on other people. But yeah, the UCC is a real thing, but it's the universal commercial code. People say, if what is it, the UCC 301, I can't remember what it is, like, without prejudice and all this stuff. And if you red stamp it or write it across, and to me, it's nonsense. I mean, unless somebody can show me and prove me wrong, I'd be more than happy to see somebody that's gone through the whole process and, has the do not detain when they're pulled over by the police, like all this nonsense. To me, it's nonsense. And I'm sorry if I offended anybody about it, but it's just, when I'm talking PMAs and working with people, I have a lot of people that come up to me and say, oh, I'm changing my status and becoming a state citizen. I'm like, what are you trying to get out of that? And nobody can really give me an answer of why they're doing it, except they just want to be left alone. One of our inherent rights, just to be left the hell alone and to be able to have our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, that sort of thing.
Aaron, how can people contact you?
So the easiest way is by either email or just give me a call. I'll give you my phone number if you guys want to write it down. It's 860-849-9227. And then you can reach me at East Coast PMA at protonmail.com. protonmail.com or whatever the heck their email is there. But it's a Proton Mail account.
And Aaron, do you want to plug your Telegram group as well?
Yeah, it's East Coast PMA on Telegram and on Facebook, but we're shutting that. I'm not posting much in there anymore because we do have non-compliant here in Connecticut, which is owned by us. It's our own social media platform. So it's we've got a page on there. It's very similar to Facebook, but none of the data goes anywhere. It stays right with us. So if you happen to look at a pair of shoes on Amazon, you're not going to see ads for it on there because there are no ads unless we put up an ad for a local, Patriot sort of thing. So you can go on there and buy bread from Melissa if you wanted to, or some of the other businesses. We do have business pages on there and stuff like that. But you can also check that out too, noncompliant.org. I believe it's all one word. 2022 is the access code. If you guys want to check it out. We're slowly bringing people in and over there. But yeah, any one of those ways is the way to get a hold of me. If I don't answer right away, shoot me a text. That's sometimes the best way, and say, hey, I need to talk to you about PMAs. There's also eastcoastpma.org is the website. Somebody's already complained about it, so you'll get like some red warning on your screen saying it's attempting to phish your information or something like that. But just blow past that, and there's videos up there that I've done. There's documents, and it's just a WordPress site. And then there's also a way to book a time with me there. There's also links to the how to win in court without a lawyer on there, and maybe the stuff for Chris Ann Hall. But yeah, those are some of the easiest ways to get a hold of me.
Links are also on your videos on your YouTube channel, aren't they?
Yep. Yeah, they are. Yep. They're also there
Rebel
too.
Alliance. It's called Rebel Alliance.
Yep. And I will let everybody know I do charge a fee for I was doing a lot of free consultations, and then they were turning in from like, a half hour free to like an hour and a half. And I was like, okay, I can't keep doing this. So I do charge a $50 fee for the first initial consultation for 45 minutes. And then that just gets deducted from the price of the PMA when you decide to get one. And that just helps keep the looky-loos, I guess is the best way to put it.
And the wife happy.
Yeah, and the wife
Hey,
happy.
we're all entrepreneurs here in Autonomy. No problem with there whatsoever. Well, Aaron, on behalf of Autonomy, Richard Grove, and Joshua, I thank you very much. It's been an amazing hour and a half. I really appreciate it. We all do.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great. Loved all the questions. Thank you very much. And I'm sure everybody's going to be laying in bed tonight at 2 a.m. and be like, oh, I should have asked Aaron that question. So I expect a lot of text messages tomorrow.
You've been listening to truthconduit.com with Chris McMillon. Go to the subscribe page and sign up to get notifications of the latest posts. And check out the support page to help keep it going.
Yeah, I've got a friend in Jesus Christ. I've got a friend in Jesus Christ, and Krishna and Buddha and my bartender.